It's interesting how you want to be remembered.
So I asked the question about what I hope the legacy is.
When thinking about your legacy, what are people going to remember about you, about your operation?
It's been an honor to be part of the Simmental family. And like any family, there is a legacy. And to me, the legacy is so important to continue on.
I hope the legacy for the next generation have the passion for our breed that we have spent a lifetime building.
Well, welcome to Spring Creek Simmentals. We started this farm with Simmentals in 1973. But prior to that, my dad and mom were here, and also my grandparents. So I'm a third generation farmer. Our farm became a century farm in the early 2000s. My grandfather came here from Ireland in the late 1800s and started farming. I think it was a pretty rough start. He was a dock worker in Ireland and come over to Saskatchewan and start farming and be quite a culture shock. Apparently he got off the train in Mooseman, and Mooseman was the end of the line at that time. And didn't have any clothes and just Oxford shoes, and said if he had the money he'd go right back to Ireland. Anyway, he didn't have the money, so he started farming, and then my dad started farming when he was 14. My dad was the youngest in his family. Then he married my mother, and she helped out in many ways along the way. My dad had commercial Hereford cattle, and I thought at the time we needed a little more milk, a little more performance. And so kind of landed on Simmental as a breed that I should get into. When I was younger, a highlight for me was always if I could get to select some replacement heifers. My dad didn't always keep some commercial heifers, but because I knew all the cow families so well, there was always heifers I wanted to keep. And it was a highlight for me if he'd say, okay, we'll keep 10 heifers. So I'd go out there and spend hours deciding which 10 heifers I was going to take. And so I was always very interested in the cattle. And then after grade 12, I decided I should go to university, and it seemed like animal science was the thing to take. So that's what I took. And at that time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a farmer or not. I liked the cattle, but I really wasn't into the farming. And so after graduation, I worked with Ag Canada in the livestock division, worked out of Winnipeg and Calgary. That was all right for a little while, but in the meantime, I had been starting to buy a few half-blood heifers, and I was raising a few half-blood heifers out of my dad's cows, and I kind of got the bug for Simmentals. So while I was at university, one of my friends, Dan Patterson from Moose Jaw, his dad imported a full-blood Simmental cow, and her name was Judette. They called her Judy. And of course, it was, as I said, it was exciting times importing cattle, and I got a lot of information talking to my friend Dan about this one cow they had at home. And so I was kind of interested in Simmentals for sure. And then after graduating, my first job was with the Department of Continuing Education, and we were teaching beef courses to farmers. It would be 3-week courses, start at 4 in the afternoon, go till 10 at night. And I had a teaching partner that I hadn't met previously, but that teaching partner turned out to be Brian Ross. And his dad, Cyril Ross, they had Ross L7 Simmentals. So between my previous liking of Simmentals through my other friend, and Brian Ross is already in the business with his dad, we kind of brainwashed those farmers on Simmentals, I think. And I think the moment that I knew I needed to quit my government job with the livestock division and come home to farm happened in Mexico. two of my friends from Winnipeg and I drove to Mexico, and we were having lots of fun as young guys would in Mexico. But one night I was laying in bed, and all I could think about were my two half-blood cows I had at home. So I thought, I guess I need to be a farmer. I need to quit my government job, and I've never regretted doing that. I told Dad one day, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to quit and come home and farm." And he said, "God, that's good." I said, "Well, but I'm probably going to do some things differently." And "God, that's good. Yep, that'll be good." So that's kind of the way it got started. And as I said before, they were always very supportive of what I wanted to do. So our farm here is located in the Spring Creek district. That's a school district, a district where I took my grades 1 to grade 8 in a country school. When I was trying to think of a name for the farm, I thought Spring Creek Simmentals. It's got a nice ring to it, a little bit of alliteration. And I also thought that I didn't want to have my name in it so much. I thought I wanted to make it more about family. And so the name, could be carried on for longer if it needed to be. So 1976 on, kept raising a few half-bloods from Dad's commercial cows. And of course, they were putting my name, and I bought a few heifers too. I bought my first two heifers on my birthday, on my 23rd birthday, in Mooseman Auction Market from Louis Crop. They cost me bred half-blood heifers. They cost me $2,000, and the other was $2,300. And then a month later, so I went to Agribition and I bought a half-blood heifer from Robert Mann from Piapot. She was Miss Elite 32D. She was a beautiful heifer and very quiet, so she became a favorite. And she cost me $3,100, which was a lot of money at the time. And my mom's dad had just passed, and she had a little bit of money, so she said, "I'll lend you the money to buy that heifer rather than taking the loan out." And so the deal was I would pay her back when I had the money. Of course, you know how that sort of thing goes. And anyway, years later, I did buy her a piano, so she considered it paid in full. The other thing, for a beginning in a breed, our association had an open herd book. So we could breed our commercial Hereford cattle to Simmental and upgrade them. And so it gave a young person with very little money a place to start, at least. And my parents were very good to me. They were glad that I was doing this, and they were very supportive. Right from the beginning, I always had a certain type of cattle that I thought were the correct cattle, the kind of cattle that we needed. And I never varied too much from that throughout the years. When looking at a female, I wanted one that was attractive headed. They needed nice udders. They had to be easy fleshing and sound footed. And I think the Simmental, when crossed with the commercial Herefords of the time, they really nicked well. The Simmentals added more milk, a little more performance. Those first half-bloods in this country were mostly half Hereford, half Simmentals. It was those half-bloods that really sold the industry on Simmental. They were easily the best calves that anybody had on their farm, and these half-bloods were selling for good money. People were taking them to Agribition, and it really it was a breath of fresh air for the industry, and created a lot of excitement. So I think the purebred, or the percentage cattle, really did a lot to get the Simmental breed established. While I had a few of these half-bloods at home, I thought I should import a full blood from Europe. At that time, if you could get an import permit, it was like winning the lottery, because it would cost you about $5,000 to get the animal here, and the minute she got here, she was worth about $20,000. So I applied for a permit, but I was deemed to be not worth it, I guess, and I didn't get the permit. But in the end, I think it was a good thing, because I think it started me developing and grading up my own herd, which I think in the long run were better suited to our commercial industry here. Really the development of purebred Canadian Simmentals went a long way to getting the Simmental breed established in the commercial business. We still have lots of good full-blood cattle, but at the time, some of them were a little heavier calving, a little heavier birth weights, maybe not as easy fleshing as some of the cattle we have developed. So while it was disappointing at the time not getting an import permit, I think in my case, it all worked out for the best. The building of the Canadian Simmental, it took a lot of work by a lot of good cattlemen, and I think we can all be proud of the breed that we have built. We've come in as an exotic breed, and today we're in the top 2 or 3 breeds in Canada. So it speaks to the success of those early breeders and the changes they made with these cattle. Without these changes, things would look a lot different today. In the early 1970s, early to mid 1970s, the local breeders around Whitewood and Mooseman formed an association, and we called it the Crossroads Association. It was a crossroads of number 1 and number 9. And this association, we had about 30 members, and they were all people that just had 1 or 2 or a handful of Simmentals, and they thought that if they had an association, they could promote and sell these cattle better. So actually the Crossroads Association was the first association formed in Canada, and we held the first production sales, and we had the first summer show. I was a director on the Crossroads Association for a few years, and was president for a time also. After that, I was a director on the Saskatchewan Simmentals Association for 2 terms. I feel it's really important to be involved in these associations to help promote the breed, and at the same time you have some changes that you would like to make. And it's easier, I think, to try to make these changes yourself rather than convince other people that they should make them. So at the time in the Saskatchewan board, a big part of our yearly calendar was agribition. Agribition was a tremendous boost for Simmentals, and we had very big shows, like 400 head of cattle at agribition, of Simmental cattle. We had sales that would go on till midnight, big sales, raised a lot of money for agribition because they took 1% commission, but it was really important in promoting Simmental. One of the first imports to come to agribition was Lacombe Achilles, and he was on display there, and there were people standing around his display pen all day long, like sometimes 6, 7 people deep. So Lacombe Achilles himself did a lot to promote Simmental in this area. After the Saskatchewan board, I got on the Canadian Simmental board, and I was on there for 2 terms or 6 years. And with the last 2 years, I served as president. And that was a really rewarding time too. I think we accomplished some good things, and it's nice to look back on those times and see the changes that you helped to bring in, and those changes have been beneficial to the breed. A couple of the things that we brought in at that time were whole herd reporting or total herd reporting. It wasn't met with a lot of exuberance to begin with, but we really felt that if we were to develop EPDs that would work and were accurate, we had to have total herd reporting. If you just reported a few cattle, the ones you registered, that's not an accurate reflection of their genetic value. Another thing that we were a part of at that time was the maternal upgrading. At the time, we could use a purebred Simmental bull on commercial cattle and raise a half-blood, but you couldn't use a purebred female to a bull of another breed and raise a half-blood. So it just didn't make sense to me, and I, along with my other fellow directors, we had quite a battle with that one. And what it enabled the breed to do was incorporate traits from other breeds very quickly. So that also helped too with popularity of the red and the black cattle. If we can incorporate more of the Angus color into these recorded and purebred Simmentals, it turned out to be a very good thing. So the Simmental business has given us a lot of memorable moments. One of the first things that comes to mind is all the successful sales we had. We started out with bull sales at Regina Bull Sale and Lloyd Bull Sale, and then we started our own sale on the farm. And the feeling after a sale when you've had a successful sale, it's a very gratifying and satisfying feeling. And to know that your cattle are in demand and accepted by the industry, that's just a nice feeling. And so I was always very grateful with all the good sales we had over the years. Another thing we did with our on-farm sales, we had PowerPoint sales. It turned out to be very successful. We just had good pictures, and it sure cut down on the help and the work and the costs. A lot of people since have used PowerPoint, and that's gone on to be more video sales. I was glad to have kind of started that for the business. It simplified things in a lot of ways. Another highlight on the farm here was we hosted the World Simmental Federation when they toured through here, when that was held in Calgary. So it was, again, humbling to have people from around the world come to little old Spring Creek, Saskatchewan to see cattle. And I often thought that the Simmental cattle put our farm on the map. So I was always grateful for that. Some of my favorite memories, of which there are probably a lot of good memories, but first thing that comes to mind is the good times we had at Agribition. I always had the same crew at Agribition, the same crew that helped me at bull sales, and we had a lot of fun. It seemed in those early days, at least, people really went to Agribition to have fun. It was almost more of a social outing than it was a business trip. But Agribition has fond memories for me, as well as going to numerous sales over the year, whether you wanted to buy or not, but there was always lots of camaraderie and you'd see a lot of people. Another thing that comes to mind is all the shows that I judged over the years. I've judged in Truro, Nova Scotia, Quebec, the Royal in Toronto, AgX, Agribition, the PNE in Vancouver, and numerous 4-H shows, regional shows. Each and every one of those places you'd run into people, and Usually end up having a beer at the end and telling old stories and talking about cattle. All of these things are a part of our business. You're marketing cattle all the time, and you never realize sometimes what you're doing, but all these things you attend, they're all helping you sell your product at the end of the day. When asked about what traditions we have on the farm, the first thing that comes to mind for me is uh, just welcome people into your house, into your home, into your corrals and pastures. I think that if you can get them into your kitchen, have some coffee, a beer, or whatever, then all of a sudden you get talking about other things. You know more about their background, their family, and it's easier to keep track of people, and you feel like you have a closer connection with them. So when thinking of advice for young breeders, I have to think about my past and wonder whether I did it the right way. I started out raising half-bloods here at home, which I think was a good thing. But at that time, we'd go to a sale and buy one or two at this sale and one or two at that sale. I think if I had it to do over again, I would do more touring prior to buying cattle. I would try to find an operation, see what kind of cattle they got, look at different management conditions, assess what your management's going to be like, your land base, your feed, the market you hope to break into. So I think I would tour some places, successful places that were doing what I hope to do. Find a herd that I like, that would fit my proposed plans, and I would probably buy 10 or 20 heifers from that farm. I think the base would be better. You'd have some cow families, and I just think it would be easier to work with that base. As you get more established, be conscious of helping other younger breeders. Sometimes it can be a lonely world for somebody just getting started, so make sure you include them in your conversations and visits. I know one thing I used to do at Agribition, there'd always invariably be a couple of first-time exhibitors that maybe didn't do that well with their cattle, and maybe by the end of the week they're wondering, was this worth it? Should I bother doing this again? What I used to do on the last Friday at Agribition, I would try to go around to those new exhibitors and take an interest, talk about their cattle, and try to make them feel like it was worthwhile them coming. It's worthwhile them being involved in this business. You probably don't have to do much, but hopefully they would go home and say, yeah, so and so came and he was interested in my cows and talked to us and asked questions about this. So you really should take an interest in the new or younger breeders and try to help them along the way. And you never know, they might become your best customer. Another piece of advice I would give to newer breeders is to know the kind of cattle you want, know the kind of cattle that will work for you and your market, and stick to it. Because there will always be fads coming by, and it may be popular today, but if you start chasing any of these fads, you're going to get away from what you know is right, what you know works. So I think over the years I've tried to stick to my guns. I think I know the kind of cattle that worked, the kind of cattle that suit my market. Try to stick to that, and some new bell and whistle comes along that you don't really think is going to be helpful, well, just avoid it. Stick to your guns. So Agribition always played a big part in my life, and while I was there in 1977, I met a gal, Sharon, and in 1979 we got married, and she's been farming with me ever since. She was also a teacher and helped out in many ways with my endeavors too.
In the early years, we couldn't afford to build a house. So I went looking for old houses. I wanted the most room I could get for the least amount of money. And I found this house in Fleming. And it was a mess. It was really bad. The roof had been leaking for 2 years. And I said to Brian, I think you should see it. And we went there and we went up into the attic and he looked out the window and he said, I think we better buy it. He had really terrible taste. Oh, he did. I lived with an orange shag carpet for 20 some years, but it was wonderful for the kids because they like to farm, right? And it was a wheat crop or whatever they wanted it to be. It got so that you were the one who went to the sales and spent time with your friends and, had fun in agribition. But I was a mother to 3 children and I took that very seriously. I wanted to be here. It was no sacrifice.
I couldn't think of a better place to raise kids than on a farm, a purebred Simmental farm. A place where the parents are proud of what they do and do a good job. The kids see that. I always say the best thing you can give your kids is confidence. And I think growing up on a farm enabled us to let them try things, let them see things, and they can develop that confidence that they can do what they want to do in their own chosen field. So I couldn't think of a better place to raise a family than here at Spring Creek.
Something that I marvel at is our children are incredibly intelligent and capable. They're kind of extraordinary people, and here we are, we're just ordinary people. They learned on the farm not to take things for granted. They say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, there was grandpa and grandma and me and Brian and we all played a role. I made sure that every night they had a good supper. I mean, I was a traditional farm wife. When the boys got to be a certain age, Brian said that they had to work a certain number of hours for the farm, and after that, he would pay them. So I don't suppose it was a very extraordinary wage that they got, but that's how things were done. They were in 4-H, all 3 of them. Lauren stuck with it longer than the boys. I think maybe just from observing as much as anything, they saw that grandma was a person who got up early every day and she had a project. And Brian worked so hard every day. Our children saw that, and I did a different kind of work in school.
Well, I just think we couldn't have done it without the help of everybody. My parents and you and hired men. We had a lot of hired men along the way, so we had a lot of help. You said when the kids were over at Bum's, it hit me that we never had to worry about them when they were there.
Oh no.
I mean, they were well looked after, and so
Oh yes.
it's nice to know that you don't have to be in 2 places at once. As it happens, our 3 children, Danny and Sean and Lauren, are all very successful in their own ventures. And so we didn't raise a farmer, but we raised 3 good farm kids that are very successful. So that's very gratifying to look back, and I'm not sad that one of them is not farming because they're doing so well in their chosen fields. And we have 7 grandchildren to spoil and go to their activities, so life is good. I want to credit my parents for all that they did throughout my lifetime. They were kind of behind the scenes people, or maybe weren't that well known in the Simmental industry, but they were always there to help me. They may not have had a lot to give at times, but they always gave whatever they did have. They were always encouraging and helping in any way they could. My mom used to do a lot of cooking for visitors and for sales. Dad would help me out buying a cow or a heifer here and there. The industry may not know them, but they were a big part of this operation for sure. I couldn't have, they gave me a place to start, and I couldn't have accomplished what I have or we have without their help. I guess some of the other kind of awards, I won the Saskatchewan Breeder of the Year. We were also selected to be in the Simmental Hall of Fame. And so that's very humbling to have that happen. I think that's like the cherry on the top, really. You get recognized by your peers. It makes all the tougher times seem not so bad when you can finish up with an award like that. So after a lot of years, like 50 years in the business, you have to start planning ahead. I thought, I think I've accomplished quite a bit in this breed, in this business. It's time to sell the cows. And so it really wasn't that hard a decision for me. I was very happy about what I had done, and but started to look forward to what I could do going forward. So we phoned up the Borson crew and set a date, and then it takes a full year to plan and execute a dispersal. One of the real challenges was getting all the pictures taken. We had nearly around 500 heads, so that's a lot of pictures to take. But then in the end, when you see the catalog and it all looks pretty good, you realize it was all worthwhile. Comes to sale time, or the day or two before, I know I was grateful for all the help I had from my children, my brother, all my immediate family. So we had a lot of help, and that felt pretty good to me to have everybody helping for this one final sale. And then when it's sale time comes, well, it is kind of emotional when you're giving your welcome thoughts. And when it's over, I had no regrets. I was 72 years old and still had lots of hobbies to look forward to, so I thought we did the right thing. In fact, if I had it to do over again, I might even do it a couple of years sooner. People have always said to me, well, you sure must miss your cows. And well, yes, but not really. I put a lot of time in, and what I really enjoy is not having to do all the work. It's kind of nice to get up and you're your own man. You can just do whatever you like. And some of the little jobs, the hobbies, they're more fun when you're not pressed for time. So when I look back at all the changes in the cattle and in our breed association, I want to say thank you to the leadership that we had through all these years. General managers Barry Bennett, Dale Kelly, Bruce Holmquist, all of them, I think, have done a really wonderful job in keeping the Simmental business at the forefront of the cattle industry. When thinking about your legacy, what are people going to remember about you, about your operation? Quite a few things come to mind. I would like the world to know that this farm is a healthier, more environmentally friendly farm now than when I started. We've adapted a lot of practices that have helped with our cattle business, and I'm happy that the farm looks the way it does. And I don't think we have anything that we can't be proud of. As far as the cattle goes, I hope that someday people will look back at a pedigree and say, oh, that goes back to one of those good Spring Creek cows or bulls. And the name Spring Creek will soon get buried, but for the studious ones, they'll maybe look back and see that prefix, and I'll be proud if they bring up the Spring Creek name. I'm also happy that I landed in this business. It gave me a life, a livelihood that is what I wanted. I wanted to work in the purebred cattle business, and Simmentals allowed that to come to fruition. And I'm really grateful for that, because I'm not sure what I would have done if it wasn't been for the purebred cattle business. If people can appreciate, your family, what your family has done, they got their start here. This farm and this business has enabled a lot of good things. So I guess when it's all said and done, if they say Brian McCarthy was a cattleman, I'll be happy with that.